All right, well, hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rebecca Snell. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at the Chapman. We are thrilled to have you here this evening. So thank you for coming out on a chilly November night and joining us for a very interesting topic. So this evening, we are joined by two members of the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance. We have John DiNuzzo, who is the president of the Battlefield Alliance. He's also a trustee of Warren County Historical Society. And we have Dan Barusch, who is also a trustee of the Alliance organization. He's also the director of planning and zoning for the village and town of Lake George. All right, so tonight, John and Dan are going to be discussing the park's planned reinterment of four early American patriots who died at the Continental Army Hospital at Lake George in 1776. So this topic obviously resonates quite strongly. We just celebrated Veterans Day last week, and we are getting ready to kind of go into full gear with America 250 and celebrating the 250th anniversary. So it's a very relevant topic. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dan and John for their talk, Repose of the Fallen at the George Battlefield.
Thank you, Becca. And thanks for having us back. Dan wasn't here with me the last time, but I think Margie Mannix was, who's another trustee and the historian for the town and village of Lake George. So I think we have a number of Battlefield Park Alliance members here. We thank you for that. We have a lot of literature, not only about joining, but also about the Repose of the Fallen project, our upcoming events, which we'll talk about, and the biggie, December the 12th, where we're doing a series of programs commemorating Henry Knox's noble artillery train and the 250th anniversary thereof. Henry Knox stayed in what is now Lake George Battlefield Park for over 2 weeks. During his effort to bring 60 tons of cannon from Ticonderoga all the way to Boston. So he was there longer than anywhere else, and we're very proud of that. We're proud about the recreation of it that we're going to have. More on that later. Dan is, as Becca said, the Director of Planning and Zoning for the town and village of Lake George. And in my assessment and many, many others, he's a rock star. I mean, and if there's any reason why we're presenting to you tonight on this subject and the victory that it represents in terms of bringing these early American patriots, the very earliest from 1776, back to where they drew their final breath, Dan Barusch is the guy who made it happen more than anyone else. I mean, it's been a team effort, but you know, orchestra can play beautiful music, but if it doesn't have a maestro, you know, the music can be kind of disoriented, disorganized, and what have you. So we're thankful for that. A few other things about the Alliance before we get into the project specifically. Our mission, we're a not-for-profit friends group to the state of New York, which operates Lake George Battlefield Park. Our mission is to protect and to promote the history of Lake George Battlefield Park and surrounding areas with regard to the 18th century military history that happened in our region. We've had a lot of notoriety, all good, in recent years from our projects and our programs. I think most commonly, most people know us from the visitor center that we operate, basically from Memorial Day through the end of October every year. We just concluded our 4th year. We have great exhibits and artifacts, and you know, we're closed off season, but if anyone ever wants to come and take a look, just email me or give me a call. I'll be happy to open it for you. I only live about a mile away. We also have a number of programs, not only speaking at locations like this, but also public programs. And again, several members here have participate in our programs. We have something called a floating history tour, which was really a great idea that one of our trustees came up with to show the history of Lake George from the water. And we did it, well, you know, we've done 2 years of it doing the south end, basically the southern 2 miles of Lake George, and showed people key sites and landed every time on Diamond Island, which was like a home run, and showed off the Battle of the Diamond Island location. And then this year, for the first time, we did 2 tours of the northern half of the lake. We started at Sabbath Day Point, went all the way to the end of Lake George, since it flows from the south to the north at Ticonderoga. So those are very, very special programs. But We do. We bring in authors, historians, to kind of communicate their expertise with us. And I think it really boosts our profile and certainly the knowledge that people have locally on our history. So we're very grateful of and proud to do those things. As I said, the biggie in the immediate future is Knox on December the 12th, and we'll be talking more about that. But we also do big projects. We're very proud, as I was speaking with Becca earlier, this year, and we refurbished the 3 bronze statues in the park, and we're very proud of that. They look sparkling new again. The youngest of the 3 sculptures is 86 years old. The oldest was dedicated in 1903, and deterioration naturally happens. But we had just a series of circumstances come together where we got the impetus, the expertise, and the money to refurbish those, and they look spectacular again. So, and the park is open for viewing, so I encourage you, weather dependent, to go see them at your convenience. But the biggest project, of course, is this, and I have no doubt that this is going to transform the heritage tourism, or whatever we want to call it, in the region, in the town of Lake George, the region, and the whole Northeast, because this will be, as you'll see, a spectacular site to visit. We owe a lot to the town of Lake George. Without exception, the town board, the town supervisor, and the town council members are 100% supportive and have put their money where their mouths are on several occasions. They support us, they support Weowaka, they support the Lake George Historical Museum, and they support Fort William Henry, which, although it's commercial, does some important historic preservation in and of itself. So we're very grateful for that, and certainly Dan's role in this project and in many other things as a member of our Board of Trustees, as is Margie Mannix, the town historian, has been indispensable. So we'll give you the details on Repose of the Fallen project, and we'll look forward to talking back and forth in terms of questions and answers. Dan Barusch.
Thanks, John. Always flattered when he boasts about me out in public, but he deserves the same praise for all the hard work he's done over the years to turn the Alliance into what it is. For those of you that were around prior to John's tenure, I think we could all agree there's been a lot of change, positive change to the Alliance. One of the things he didn't mention, which is one of my favorite things that the Alliance is doing right now, is the podcasts. Battlefield Park Moments. I see a lot of heads nodding.
Nodding off.
Favorite program for me to listen to on my ride up to work. So if you haven't checked those out, they come out weekly, I think.
Yep.
And a lot of them are tied to some of the stuff you're going to hear about today, some of the stuff you're probably watching in the American Revolution series. Actually, perfect timing for the American Revolution series. Some of what you're going to hear is kind of tied into what's been on the show the past couple of nights. So, as John and Laura mentioned, my name is Dan. I've given this presentation a few times now, so bear with me. We can do, unless anyone objects, we can do little questions as we're going, and maybe at the end we can do any questions anybody has left. So, take you back to 2019, winter 2019. In February, during the excavation on a construction site, a triplex, there was an approval for 2 triplex, so 2 buildings, 3 units each, 6 units total, on a parcel on Cortlandt Street. If anyone does not know where Cortlandt Street is, it's 2 blocks back from Canada, behind where Lobster Pot and like the old Pancake House was. The Pancake House was recently demolished. During construction, they were excavating for the footings and the foundation of the building, and they encountered human remains. Much to the chagrin of the developer, once they called the town, the sheriff's department, and we made the proper calls to the required authorities, they had to stop, because what was encountered wasn't just a series of remains. It was a graveyard, right? It was effectively a burial ground. We know that, and there's pictures that are coming up. We know that it was that because of the way the soil strata was, the composition of the soil. You can clearly see grave shafts on the side wall of the excavated hole. So within hours of us being notified and the sheriffs arriving on site with us, we mobilized historic preservation officers from DEC and the State Historic Preservation Office. We mobilized archaeologists out of the New York State Museum, and within 24 or 36 hours, the Deputy Attorney General for, I think, the environment at the time actually was up on site. It was a relatively large and important finding at a construction site in terms of human remains, and it is believed to be the impetus, or at least one of the main driving forces, for what's now called the Unmarked Burial Bill that was passed a couple of years ago now. So to date, and I'm not going to read all of this, you guys can read as I'm speaking. To date, the museum, who is now currently holding the remains until the reinterment, they have analyzed 44 individual sets. As you can imagine, they were found on a construction site. They were found after and during excavation. The remains are in pretty tough shape, and it has been probably the most complicated jigsaw puzzle of putting pieces back together that the State Museum has ever seen. They have been doing a fantastic job at trying to do that. I don't think that they're going to complete what they wanted to, because there's just not complete sets of each and every one of those remains. It wasn't as if we found them at a time where we could go in and unearth them one by one. They were all effectively disturbed by the time everybody was called and mobilized. It is believed that what was found, and we'll mention this again, and again, this connection to the series that's been playing, believe that what was found was the site of a cemetery, the burial ground associated with the smallpox hospital at Fort George during the Revolutionary War era. You've all were sitting here when John was talking about smallpox, the disaster the role that it played in the disaster that was the 1775-1776 campaign, and the estimate of how many people were buried around Fort George and in the area that died of smallpox, hundreds up to possibly thousands. So we believe, based on analysis, looking at period maps, looking at journals and other accounts from the battalion and that time frame, we believe this area and a lot of the surrounding geography was within the bounds of the burial ground associated with the smallpox hospital. So, and I'm bolding what's, I think, most important. It is, I think, uncontested, one of the modern history's most important archaeological finds in the Lake George region. Trying to throw some photos in there. I hate PowerPoints that are just text. We lose people usually. So these are photos from February 2019. We were lucky enough to get somebody to fly a drone while we were out there. I mentioned within 24 to 48 hours, we mobilized a ton of people to the site, specifically archaeologists and volunteer historians and archaeologists. This top left photo and the bottom right photo are great pictorial representations of what ensued over the next week. A all hands on deck effort to recover the remainder of the materials, the human remains that were still in the walls, the excavated walls. You can see there were actually people digging on both of these walls, this south wall and this east wall. There were still active, what I would call active grave shafts in those walls, meaning there were human remains, there were bones sticking out of the soil still. So half of these grave shafts were disturbed. The other half of them were basically left as is. One can speculate why that happened and how that happened, but you can see pretty clearly in the two photos the footings are already in the ground. So if anyone has any knowledge of construction, I think there was a reason that they went that far and stopped at that point. It was to get the footings in the ground. So I have to tip my hat to all of the people in these photos. They are the reason that we got there quickly. They're the reason that we were able to recover the remains. They are the reason that the developer and the owner and his lawyer didn't tell us to scram. They really pulled together a huge effort, and over the next week to 10 days, everything was recovered from the site, with the exception of whatever was in that pile, that backfill pile. That pile in the top right is what was removed and excavated from the earth in this photo, okay? Over 14 months after February was when these same people spent hours and hours, almost every weekend, for about a year and change, sifting through the backfill pile and finding many, many more sets, we'll call them sets and pieces of sets of the remains that were recovered on the site. If anybody knows the late Chuck Vandry, Chuck was an integral part of this project, and he was there from day one. He was a historic preservation officer from DEC. This is him right here in the photo, David Starbuck. So we had a lot of heavy hitters on the site. It was pretty cool. Like I said, the Deputy Attorney General for the Environment, I believe, showed up. She was on the phone the whole time. It was really a cool thing, and it was a great response to an issue that happens all over the country, and in many occasions, and you'll hear this from other people, the response to the findings is not always the same, right? And what we've heard from the U.S. Army, from the New York Army, from the State Historic Preservation Office, is that our response is one of the best they've ever seen. So what happened right after? The remains were found. We get to the site. We're recovering. It's about 2 weeks later. What do? The museum, the State Museum, is up there. They're planning to take the remains for analysis, but now they have these 44 sets of remains, and what do? So the town board initiated the process to form what is now called the Cortlandt Street Reinterment Committee. John sits on the committee. I'm on the committee. Margie Mannix is on the committee. Chuck Vandry was on the committee. If any of you know Lisa Anderson, she's the bio-curator of archaeology at the State Museum. She's on the committee. A lot of people that were involved from day one. This committee has been meeting monthly since 2019, probably my most active committee, and I sit on many of them, to plan for the respectful reinterment of these remains, to plan out every detail of how they're going to be reinterred respectfully, honorably, in the right location, in the right structures, with the right setting, all of it. And shortly thereafter, when we decided we're going to plan for this reinterment, we decided we're also going to plan a ceremony around the reinterment itself. And you'll hear a little bit more about that a bit later. So I mentioned a few people on the committee, but there's representatives from the village, there's representatives from DEC, we have representative from the State Museum, from the County Historical Society, from the Lake George Historical Association. Basically anybody that's got any relevance or connection to historic preservation in Lake George, there's a representative on this committee. And it has been doing outstanding and diligent work over the past 6 years, basically, 6+. So the design took us a couple years to get to that point, to have a real design, something on paper that we felt was honorable enough and respectful enough and proper, the reinterment of these early patriots. The design includes reinterment structures, probably know them as columbaria, typically find them in cemeteries. They're above ground structures that house typically urns, not full sets of remains. It's not a mausoleum. Those are the big fancier structures. So it's really a pretty basic series of columbaria structures that are going to house these remains, that are going to be in boxes, not individual niches, so they're all together. And then these columbaria really are flanked by what we're calling this pedestrian plaza, which is really a place to ponder, a place to relax, a place to respect, and a place to just feel like you're part of that site and interpret the history. It's going to have signs, interpretive signage. It's going to have information about who these people were, how they perished, how they were found, the process that got them to that point. There's going to be beautiful landscaping. There's going to be a monument in the middle, similar to the 4 Unknown Soldiers monument. We're going to have beautifully inscribed benches that were donated by the Sons of the American Revolution. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is really going to be what John mentioned, kind of a pinnacle of heritage tourism in this area, and one of the first sites in the nation that is focused on the reinterment of historic remains, right? And we think it's probably going to be the first of many that end up popping up around the nation as more of these remains are found. I'm not going to get into the detail about the approval process, but I will tell you it was a relatively arduous one. You know that the property is in ownership of New York State DEC. It is also considered to be within what's called Forest Preserve. And another layer on top, because it's within the Adirondack Park and it's a state-owned piece of land, it has to go through what's called a unit management plan process. All of that took quite a while, but we got there. And in the spring of last year, we finally got our approvals, which really set us on the fast track towards the finish line, to where we are today. Project. The hollowing of the ground was a ceremony that we had last year, which was really, I hate to call it the ribbon cutting, because it really wasn't. It was a blessing of the grounds before the project was to start. So we convened a lot of the partners. We convened the local Army chaplain. We convened some ministers from the local churches, and we basically, gave thanks to these early patriots, and then we blessed the ground on which this project was to be built on. It was a really cool opening event, we'll call it, and a lead up to the bigger event, which will be next year. We have been lobbying for years. John and I have taken several trips down to Albany to meet with Senator Schumer's staff. We've had many meetings and discussions with State Senator Steck and Assemblyman Simpson on this. They've done a joint proclamation in the state legislature. Schumer's been in the paper on numerous occasions, publicly supporting and touting this project, trying to help us with the approval that we thought we needed from the U.S. Army. Additionally, we've done cultural resource survey program surveys of the property just to make sure that where we were putting this project did not also have remains in it. So the sites were cleared and we're good there. That would have been kind of ironic if we found additional remains where we were planning to reinter. So about a year ago, the plans for the project were finished. We've been making small tweaks here and there over the months, but they were done in enough time to get that final approval from the state. And since then, we really have undertaken a vast fundraising effort. So far, we have raised, just through the fundraising effort, we've raised a little bit over $120,000. There's a couple big donors in there. There's a couple of a decent amount of medium-sized donors, but what I really like to say, and it's similar to how election campaign fundraising works, there was a lot of small donors. And that's when you know a project has sensibility and a project has popular mindset, and people like it at the base level. People are donating 10, 20, 30, 50 bucks. That's when you know it's a project worth donating to. So we do have large donations. One was from the Sons of the American Revolution, which is one of the ones we're most proud about, involving them, getting them involved, getting their buy-in, and actually having them contribute to something specific. So those benches I mentioned earlier are going to have Sons of the American Revolution inscriptions in them. The other funding that we were lucky enough to get to help pay for this project comes from the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. I'm not going to get into that detail because I could give a whole presentation about DRI. DRI is a state program that gives one community in each region of the state $10 million each year. So if you're live in Glens Falls or have seen the transformation on South Street, those are DRI projects. They were awarded DRI 6 or 7 years ago. We were just awarded about 2 years ago, and we were lucky enough to have the state agree that $520,000 of that $10 million should be spent on this project. So effectively, this project is paid for until I get maybe some more change orders from the contractor. And we're still fundraising because we're trying to both set up the costs and cover the costs for these events that we're having and set up a legacy fund because we have to maintain this project now. Couple more photos. I don't like throwing photos of myself in these presentations, but some of these are really good. This photo has every local and state dignitary you could think of: town supervisor, Assemblyman Simpson, Senator Steck. This was interim DEC commissioner. There's Chuck Vandry again, Lynn Homan, Lisa Anderson, Marissa Muratori. Top left is me showing Senator Schumer the plans for the project. He's come to the site twice now, I think, and met with John and I on multiple occasions. And then, another one of Chuck speaking about the project. This is from the hollowing of the ground. So again, I don't really love calling it a ribbon cutting, but we did actually cut a ribbon there. So it's kind of what the event was meant to be. I think that's the next slide. Yep. So this is an image of the old conceptual design. This is something that was developed early on in the design phase. We tried to really encapsulate what we thought was going to be the best layout for the project, the most inviting for people to visit, to walk through, to ponder. So we have the columbarium down here along the south. I mentioned signage, there's seating, there's a monument right in the middle. These circular things are planted areas with seating walls. So there's a lot of space for people to just sit down or stop at a sign and listen or learn. Look at the lake, whatever you want to do. But really what people are going to do when they come here is learn. We have a series of signs scattered throughout. We're going to go everywhere from basically the American Revolution in general, down to the smallpox hospital, down to the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion, down to the burial grounds and the burials that we found elsewhere throughout the town. In the back, you can see the columbarium. These are renderings that we had done really to just show what this project and site will look like when it's built. Another shot of the columbarium, so you can kind of see what the structures are going to look like. They're effectively above ground structures that house the remains. None of them are going to be put in urns or anything like that. We're actually going to have, or in the process of having, specialty made pine, I guess you could call them coffins, boxes, by the Northeast Woodworkers Association. It was actually a donation from them to the project. So we thought that was another cool aspect of this, is we're putting them back in original wooden boxes that they probably would have been laid in at the time. Project location, if anybody knows the Battlefield Park, I'm sure many of you do. It's really right along Fort George Road. If you know where the new Park Commission building is, it's right across Fort George Road from there, probably 50 yards down, closer to the lake. So it's within walking distance of the visitor center. It's within walking distance of Beach Road. It's located right along the pathways that we have in the park that will lead you to the Mohawk Warrior statue, to the 4 Unknown Soldiers Memorial, Hendrick Johnson. I mean, everything is within eye shot, really, of where this project is going. This is the final design, and it really did not change much from the early conceptual. Couple of tiny tweaks here and there. But it has the same general outline, outlay. It has the same connection to the trails and the pathways in the park. Has the same monument in the middle, which is going to be a beautiful black granite monument inscribed. We're keeping the inscription a secret for the unveiling day. And then again, places to sit, right? We didn't lose sight of seating areas. These are those benches from the Sons of the American Revolution. Right now, we're working on the content for the signage. A lot of landscaping, right? It has to be beautiful. A lot of landscaping. That is probably where 50% of the maintenance costs are going to go once this thing is done. Planting, replanting, watering, keeping it up. As you can imagine, the state is leaning on the town to help with the maintenance long term, which is something we're willing to do just because of the importance of this project. We want to make sure that it stays in the shape that it should in perpetuity. So a couple major updates really since last year, and part of the reason I put this in here is because I've given this presentation a few times, and every time I give it, I have to give updates because there's just been so much happening over the past couple of years. The Town of the Alliance has been now holding monthly meetings with state DEC representatives. It's probably the best example that I could give you after working 10 years in local government of communication and coordination with a state agency. It's actually quite impressive that we get so many people from a state agency on a call once a month routinely to talk about something because it's not an easy feat, and everybody's busy nowadays. Everybody's understaffed nowadays. So that communication collaboration has been, I think, very important to this project. Project went out to bid. That happened at the end of last year, early this year. We selected contractors. We are now working, and I'll get to a photo in a little bit of where the project is right now. Actually, yesterday I took the photo. We were lucky enough to get a local site contractor. They're right out of Latham, Peak Environmental. They've been doing a great job so far. Got a couple of veterans on their staff, so they were super happy to bid on this project and to be awarded, and for a relatively reasonable price. And we were very lucky to get a company out of Minnesota, company I've never heard of, but a company made up of all Air Force veterans that specialize in columbarium. So we were so lucky that they found our bid because there was no other bids. And when we searched across the state, there was no other firms that specialized in this type of structure. So they hit us up all the way from Minnesota, and they could not be happier to be working on this project with us. As I mentioned, construction's underway. We started, I think, a few weeks after Labor Day this year. I mentioned the Sons of the American Revolution partnership. I think that's pretty important here. Those guys are very active throughout the nation. There are many states that have chapters, and they give out a lot of money and resources to different efforts and local groups. We've been told on more than one occasion this is the largest fundraising give that they've given to anyone in the state's history. So we're pretty proud of that. And I think that the benches that they're paying for are really going to speak for themselves once they're out on site. Ceremonial planning has been underway for years now. If it's not in your calendars already, put it in your calendars. Friday, May 22nd next year. It will be about an hour and a half, possibly up to 2 hours long event in the Battlefield Park right at the project site. We're expecting probably 500 people. It's going to be a big event. There's going to be a lot of notables there. We're hoping the governor is there to be a speaker. Senator Schumer should be there, all the way down to the local electeds. We assume and expect a lot of locals will be there because locals have much vested interest in the history of Lake George. And I mentioned that earlier with the fact that everybody has a story, everybody has something at home, whether it's a flint or a cannonball. It's pretty cool to see that. It doesn't exist everywhere. Took this photo yesterday of the site. If you know the park well, you can kind of get a feeling of where we're standing. This is the macadam path that goes into the woods towards the pavilion. So the project is well underway. As you can see, there's the inside circle that was the seating wall. And then this outside curbing is that exterior row right in front of where the columbariums are going to be. So we had a nice call today to talk about progress and how fast and how much they're going to get done before we get snow. that's obviously sort of an unknown, but they're moving along, and we're happy to see progress. And they tell me that they will be done in plenty of time to have the event still for the day that it's planned. Fundraising efforts. I mentioned fundraising. We're still fundraising. We've raised about 120. We have a website. It's pretty active. We're still uploading news stories and things to it. There is a way to donate to the project on the website if digital donations are something that you or anybody that you know do. We have a lot of literature that we developed a couple of years ago. This is an excellent brochure. You guys, if you've not seen one, you can take one before you leave today. It has really a high-level overview of the project, the findings, the effort, kind of a lot of the same information you're getting tonight, but a take-home, and it also has a little card in there for donations. We're still making requests. We're still out there trying to find partnerships and organizations, the foundations, the stewards of the world. We're still trying to lock down a few, and we have a few promises out there that we've got to secure. One of the things that we were trying to do, not just with the project in general, but for those donors, we wanted to give back to the people donating and show them thanks, right, for contributing to such an important project. So we developed a series of mementos, big, medium, small mementos that are going to go to the people that are involved or to the people that are donating, and hopefully to the people that show up for the event. So we've got these very cool 1st Pennsylvania Battalion replica buttons. We have some commemorative medals, and then for those that are donating larger sums, they're actually getting individualized plaques. There will also be a site plaque on the site that's going to basically give thanks to those who participated in the project, also to those who donated a certain amount of money. So I believe it's $5,000 and up gets you on the site plaque. Your name's on the project site in perpetuity. And the project team, the stakeholders, supporters, large donors, anybody that gives, I think, $500 and up, is actually going to be honored and invited to attend a luncheon after the ceremony on that Friday. Just some photos. Again, I like to throw photos in my PowerPoints. Top left, that's what the website landing page looks like. The website is reposeofthefallenlg.org. And it's easy to get to. Once you're there, you can read a ton of news stories. We've got stuff that's been in the papers all the way back to 2019 is uploaded on that website. It's got the design, everything really is on there. Top right is the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion button replicas. We ordered 300 of them. Anyone that's donated has gotten a button. And what we're going to do with the remainders is we're going to kind of just give them out at the event, first come. Whoever shows up first, we're going to have ushers that are going to give them out. Bottom left is the ceremonial medal. This is something that everyone who donates 500 or more is going to get. It's very similar to if you've got 250th medals from French and Indian. They're about this big. They're typically given out at important ceremonies or events. I'm sure there's a handful being made for next year's events. But this one is very specific to Cortland. It's got an insignia of the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion on it. I've mentioned 1st Pennsylvania Battalion a handful of times. There wasn't really much information on the PowerPoint. The remains that were found on the site, 2 of the burials came with artifacts. There are a handful of 1st Pennsylvania Battalion buttons that are down at the State Museum with the remains that came from 2 of those burial sites. There's also a dozen and a half pewter buttons without insignia or any notation on them. But the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion buttons are really what connected the findings at this site to the smallpox hospital. The 1st Pennsylvania Battalion was a regiment in 1775 to 1776, a very small regiment, most of whom passed away from smallpox at Fort George. So that's sort of been the face of the project. The insignia of the project is the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion button. The real buttons that are down at the museum are in pretty rough shape, but we were lucky enough to find a company that makes the replicas. So we had them made, and we're giving them out to people that donate. This is just a picture of the brochure that's up here. Remaining timeline, we're still under construction. Construction should be done probably in early spring. The fundraising window really is up until late winter, give or take. We hope by next month we'll be close to 75% complete. That really depends on the weather. Who knows what'll happen there? But we will have the project substantially completed by April, and the columbaria are set to be delivered at the end of April or the earlier part of May. The mid-May, early May is really when we'll get in there and plan all the pretty landscaping. And then May 22nd, we'll have the ceremony. That week, that's a Friday, May 22nd. That week, there will be a procession from Albany, from the State Museum, in escorted military vehicles. All of the remains will be brought up to the site. The majority of them will be reinterred prior to that Friday, and there will be 4 ceremonial caskets left out for the procession on Friday at the ceremony. It will take much too long, much too much time to try to reinter everybody at the ceremony. So I put this at the end of this presentation, really because people ask, how can I help? How can I participate? How can I partner? So the number one thing is help us spread the word, right? If anyone's mentioned to you, hey, did you hear about the project in Lake George with the remains? Tell them what you know about it. Spread the word. Tell people there's an event happening next May 22nd. Tell them to come. It's open to the public. We want as many people there as we can get. Tell them to learn and read and try to find out about what this project is, who these people were, and why we're doing what we're doing. A lot of that information can be found in the articles on the website. Call us, call John, call myself. We're always happy to talk about this project. I always suggest, you can be an ambassador for this thing. Tell people that this is one of a kind. Get them involved. Try to get them to donate. Try to get them to come to the ceremony with groups of people. Whatever you can do, I think will help the project and the participation in the ceremony. I think everybody's going to be excited, right, to be a participant or even just a spectator at this event. Probably the largest that the park will have seen since the Johnson statue, which if you've seen the photo of that from 1903, there were a ton of people in that park. 500 is a lot of people, and we could very well hit more than that. I think I have 190 RSVPs already to the invitation list, which was not that many people, right? And it's open to the public. So at the end of this slideshow, my email will be on the screen. If you want a direct invitation, like I said, it's open to the public, so please just come. If you want a direct invitation, take my email down and I'll add you to the list and send you one. Sure.
Once you have the ceremony, this is open to the public and for the whole rest of the time.
As long as the park is open, yep. Mm-hmm. It's the Friday before, strategically situated to that weekend. Years ago, we thought this event was going to be in 2024, right? And then the approval process took a while. Then we thought it was going to be 2025. Then the design process, so we're finally there, and it's definitely going to happen on May 22nd, but it is the Friday before Memorial Day. We didn't want to overlap it with the normal ceremony we do on that Monday, but we still wanted it to be tied to Memorial Day. So that's why it's that Friday. Consider hosting a fundraising event or a sponsored event, or even just helping us table something at an event. We've been tabling. We've tried to organize like a gala or an event, fundraising event for the project. We really have not had the bandwidth to do something like that. It could still be done. It could still be helpful. But what we're telling everybody is if you don't have the time or the resource or the willpower to do something like that, then donating, even just 10, 20 bucks, right? Donate to the cause and help be a part of the project. So we can do a few more Q&A if we have time, but this is my email at the bottom. That's my phone number above to town hall. I'm around Monday through Friday. I have a lot of meetings throughout the week, but I usually get back to people very quickly. So email, you'll get a response in an hour, no less or no more. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes.
What percentage of the columbarium are going to be used in this initial 44?
Great question. Great question. So 4 of the columbaria are going to house the Cortlandt Street remains. With them, and I didn't mention this earlier, so thanks for asking. With them in those first 4 columbaria are going to be the remains that were found 2 years ago next to the lobster pot and last year next to the pancake house. Those 2 findings, which are both within the last 48, 24 months, we believe they are also part of the burial ground that came down from Cortlandt Street. It's literally 75 yards away from the Cortlandt Street site proper. The one that was found 2 years ago next to the lobster pot is 20 yards from findings they had back in the 60s and 70s when they were doing water work. So those are going to be put in with Cortlandt Street because we believe they were all part of the same burial ground. The 5th one is actually planned to host French and Indian War remains that the Fort William Henry has had in their possession for quite some time. We're hoping to have a secondary ceremony probably in 2027 at the site commemorating the French and Indian remains. And the 6th one strategically is being left empty because there will be more. And we want to have space for the future finds. So, yes.
Do you bring any contract to expedite the process so that their projects are not held up for months on end?
Yes and no. Yes and no. We act as quickly as we possibly can. That's the yes side. The no side is, since the unmarked burial bill has been passed, there is now a process in law that anybody, contractor, private landowner, even a municipality, anybody has to follow in order to fulfill the requirement within that legislation. And it's not a super easy process. I'm not saying it's one that takes forever, but it is effectively the same process that we followed back in 2019. And that bill was passed, I think, a couple of years ago. So they're trying to help streamline what should happen when somebody comes across remains. Will that hold up projects? We're not sure. We were lucky enough to organize all of those people and get them all to the site within a day or two, and to get them off the site having finished the work we asked them to do within 10 days. So the contractors on this project were barely held up. I mean, they had their footings in the ground, and 2 weeks from the day that we first got to the site, they were pouring the rest of their foundation. Can I say the same for other sites? I'm not sure. Depends on where you are and who follows the process. Yes, it did. It did. Yep.
And then
We have talked to the Pennsylvania National Guard. They are sending a handful of people to the event. We have contact with the lead reenactor from the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion reenactment group, who is actually coming to the ceremony in full garb. Yes,
Yes.
Matt.
Yep.
Matt, yep. He's actually going to have an encampment set up across the road at the event. SAR is very involved. Pennsylvania, yes.
Yeah.
The New York Society, the Empire State Society of the Sons of American Revolution, has been in contact with the Pennsylvania chapter. And we have on our committee a Daughters of the American Revolution member who has been in contact with New York State and Pennsylvania. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. It'll be very interesting over the years that follow to see if there's any genealogical connections made. We actually sent, I think, 1 or 2 fragments of the remains to, is it McAllister University? I think McMaster. They're doing, I believe they're doing carbon dating.
They've got a whole program that apparently doesn't exist in the States.
Right.
That they're doing to help, analyze what they can.
That on one set of bones?
As a sample.
Yeah.
As a sample.
Yeah.
But you're
So
not
they
doing-
didn't do it, they're not doing it on all 4.
No, the Army would not let us. The Army did not want us to do that.
Oh, no DNA.
I don't know if they're doing DNA. I think they're doing carbon dating and they're looking for smallpox. It's a traces of. It is a program within a research foundation at that college that focuses on smallpox research. They reached out to us pretty quickly.
Where's the first battalion from?
I don't know.
I think it was in the suburb, what's now the suburbs of Philadelphia, that they were created. I know what their base is now is in that same area. I forget the county that's just north of Philadelphia, but basically the reenactment group is from there. And the whole, I mean, it's interesting, and you talk about how circular history can be. McMaster University is a well-known institution in Canada. And again, the East First Pennsylvania, and for those who've been watching Ken Burns this week, it's kind of reinforced the disastrous, as Dan called it, attempt to invade Canada in 1775-76. The First Pennsylvania was part of that, and they were part of the whole group of American, Continental Army and militia soldiers who came back infected with smallpox. They came back to Crown Point after they were defeated in May of 1776, I think it was. They went en masse down to Crown Point, and given the state of contagion there, they decided to segregate them from the healthy people. So rather than send them on to Fort Ty, that's when the smallpox hospital was created at Fort George to treat smallpox infected soldiers. And again, if there were 3,700 patients totally, over a third of them died of the disease, so the virus. So, I mean, that's a part of the circle. One other thing, and Dan mentioned they're going to have an encampment of the First Pennsylvania. One of the things I don't believe Dan mentioned is that part of the ceremony, in addition to the motorcade from the State Museum of the remains up to Lake George, will be a procession for the remains that will be buried on May the 22nd or interred on May the 22nd, comprising people who work the site at Cortlandt Street. So they will be, that's a plan right now anyways, to have them be the pallbearers, if you will, carrying the caskets over to the reinterment site. So again, it'll be a nice synchrony to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been watching Ken Burns, I didn't see last night because I had another night meeting up in Lake George. But Monday night, I mean, they were talking about Knox, they were talking about smallpox. So I wouldn't be surprised if last night's had a mention of Lake George in it. That hospital became the largest. It did. It became the largest military hospital in the Northeast associated with the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that was right here in our backyard is probably one of the coolest things that we can say about our role in the Revolution.
And it's funny you mentioned Knox, because on December the 12th, and I think probably most of you are already aware of this, but I wanted to share, we've had a fabulous response. And of course, it's been compounded this week with the Ken Burns documentary series on PBS. But our there's 4 events actually. One of them will be author Rick Atkinson, who's very prominent in the Ken Burns documentary, will be coming to Lake George and speaking, first of all, on Friday morning, December the 12th, to classroom students who were assigned to read his American Revolution books over the summer. So he'll be having, imagine having a historian of that note in your class in 7th grade, 11th grade, whatever, talking about his book with you. So that's going to happen throughout the morning of December the 12th. And then at lunchtime, he's meeting with the representatives of the school paper. It's kind of like a journalist's inspiration to them or something. So we're very proud of that. The 3 public events we're having on December 12th at 3 o'clock, and you can have a sheet up here. At 3 o'clock, we're going to have a reenactment of Knox arriving at Lake George in a bateau, and basically have we have the bateau arranged. He's going to be rowed to the head of Lake George at Dog Beach, roughly, if you know where that is, and then he'll be transported along with some replica cannons up Fort George Road to the entrance of Lake George Battlefield Park, again where he stayed back in 1775. And he'll make a short speech, but we'll have a fife and drum tandem from the Glens Falls Symphony. We'll have 40 other reenactors demonstrating their wares throughout that afternoon. So it should be a fascinating afternoon. We have Rick Atkinson as a feature at a reception at the Holiday Inn at 4:30 that day. That's sold out. If you haven't gotten your ticket, unfortunately, there's no more to be had, but we're thrilled by the response to that. And finally, at 7 o'clock that night, a free public event, again featuring Rick Atkinson and what's his name? Matt Rogowitz of WMHT will be interviewing Rick Atkinson on stage at Lake George High School Auditorium. There'll be books from Rick Atkinson there for purchase and signature by the author. Basically, Matt is going to interview him on stage. People in the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions of him and things like that. So we're very proud of that event. The next day, according to Sarah Hall, in Washington County, in Fort Edward, there will be a procession commemorating Knox from Fort Edward to the old Fort House Museum and then to the Fort Miller, the same route that Knox took back in 1775, 76. And Saturday afternoon, the 13th of December, something similar commemorations will take place in Schuylerville, where he also was for a while. Then Sunday the 14th down in Albany at the Van Skyke Mansion in Cohoes, and then at the Schuyler Mansion in downtown Albany. So help yourself to literature, help yourself to questions. If there's any other questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, super. Well, I'm glad you're excited.
Thank you, guys.